The Maduro regime is not the legitimate government of Venezuela. It is a narco-terror cartel. In Maduro, it is the view of this administration, is not a legitimate president. He is a fugitive head of this cartel who has been indicted in the United States for trafficking drugs into the country.
Hoy estamos más fuertes que ayer. Hoy estamos más preparados para defender la paz, la soberanía y la integridad territorial que ayer.
We have Venezuela acting up in a different way. They continue to send people that we rebuff to our border. They continue to send drugs into our country. Venezuela, they've been very nasty, and we can't let that happen.
He's prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into our country and to bring those responsible to justice.
Yeah, President Trump is furious after the DEA confirmed Maduro's civilian militia has now forged ties with Mexico's most violent cartel, El Mencho's CJNG. 3 U.S. destroyers and thousands of Marines are steaming fast toward Venezuela, while Maduro is arming millions of civilians to meet them, with a $50 million bounty on his head and cartel alliances stretching from Caracas to Jalisco. This is the opening act of a narco war that could set the entire hemisphere on fire. Let's break it all down and see how on earth we got here.
The DOJ has seized over $700 million of Maduro-linked assets, including 2 private jets, 9 vehicles, and more. Yet Maduro's reign of terror continues. He is one of the largest narco traffickers in the world and a threat to our national security. Therefore, we've doubled his reward to $50 million.
When Trump's administration raised Nicolás Maduro's bounty to $50 million, the world understood the message. Washington no longer saw him as a head of state, but as a fugitive narco-terror boss.
It is the view of this administration, is not a legitimate president. He is a fugitive head of this cartel who has been indicted in the United States for trafficking drugs into the country.
And yeah, $25 million was the price once put on bin Laden's head. The U.S. considers Maduro one of the planet's most dangerous enemies at the moment.
El gobierno de Estados Unidos ha intensificado sus acciones contra una organización delictiva que no solo trafica narcóticos, sino que, según la propia administración, representa una amenaza para la estabilidad de todo el hemisferio.
The DEA framed it in cartel language, claiming that Venezuela itself had become a trafficking hub, feeding cocaine and fentanyl into the United States. And that's why the warships appeared. The USS Gravely, USS Jason Dunham, and USS Sampson, each armed with more than 100 guided missiles, were deployed into the southern Caribbean with an amphibious squadron carrying 4,500 sailors and Marines. Surveillance aircraft and submarines were spotted too, marking the largest U.S. military deployment in Latin waters since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Officially, this was about stopping drug routes, Pam Bondi said in a press conference last week.
This is not a legitimate presidential regime. He is a narco-terrorist. He and his associates are flooding our country with cocaine as a plot against America.
Unofficially, everyone knew it looked a lot like the opening moves of regime change. For Washington, removing Maduro would mean so much more than cutting off coke shipments. It would hand the U.S. control over one of the largest oil reserves on the planet, weaken Russia and China's foothold in Latin America, and replace a hostile narco state with a potential ally. In theory, toppling Maduro could reset the entire balance of power in the Western Hemisphere.
Venezuela has exported eye-watering number of migrants the U.S. is now targeting for heavy-handed deportations.
Those numbers keep rising because Maduro's regime has plunged millions into poverty, collapsing infrastructure, and political repression that leaves ordinary families no choice but to run.
In the last year of the pandemic, Venezuela's poverty rate increased by about 9%, according to a recent study. Around 3 out of every 4 Venezuelans now live in extreme poverty. But this isn't just happening here. Hunger is spreading like a virus across Latin America and the Caribbean. A new report by the UN found more than 59 million people in the region are going hungry. That's an increase of more than 13 million people in just 1 year.
If war actually broke out between Caracas and Washington, the exodus would be on an even greater scale, driving millions more toward US borders. So would Trump really want this to happen when immigration is one of his hottest topics? Experts say the logic in Washington is simple. The US has to cut the head off the snake. Trump's team believes that by removing Maduro, they could sever the Cartel de los Soles, disrupt cartel alliances, and restore US dominance in the hemisphere. But analysts warn the cost could be astronomical. Unlike Panama in 1989, Venezuela wasn't a small strike target. Russia had supplied air defenses, China had poured in money, and Maduro isn't backing down at all. In fact, he decided to nationalize the fight.
And we end today with growing tensions between the United States and Venezuela. In a dangerous escalation, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has announced the deployment of more than 4.5 million militia across the country.
Next, he called millions of civilians into the streets, arming them to fight alongside the army and his cartel allies.
In Caracas, teachers, retirees, and public works queued up in the city squares with military barracks pledging to defend their homeland against what the Venezuelan leader calls U.S. aggression.
And Venezuelan media is showing patriots vowing to keep Trump from invading their country.
We are responding to the call made by the constitutional president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, as we enroll in the Bolivarian militia to prevent any empire from setting foot on this homeland of liberators again.
The stakes are no longer just a US-Venezuela confrontation. This is shaping up to be a conflict that could ignite the entire Western Hemisphere and possibly pull in rival superpowers too. Here's why Trump thinks this is all worth it. For years, rumors swirled that Nicolás Maduro wasn't just Venezuela's president, he was its top trafficker. This month, the DEA confirmed it.
The DOJ has seized over $700 million of Maduro-linked assets, including 2 private jets, 9 vehicles, and more.
U.S. prosecutors allege the Cartel de los Soles, made up of Venezuelan generals and Maduro's inner circle, funnels somewhere around 300 tons of white powder out of the country every year. And unlike traditional cartels, this one runs through state-controlled airports and ports, hiding behind military insignias.
In Maduro, it is the view of this administration, is not a legitimate president. He is a fugitive head of this cartel who has been indicted in the United States for trafficking drugs into the country.
The busts back it up. 30 tons of cocaine mixed with were intercepted in shipments tied directly to Maduro's networks. Add Maduro's $700 million in assets to the mix, and you've got undeniable evidence. That was all the proof Washington needed that the Venezuelan presidency had become the headquarters of a giant cartel. So, as the CEO of a narco state, Maduro is being treated like bin Laden, and even through all the massive seizures, Maduro held on.
Let the world know, let the empires know that today more than ever, Venezuela can defend itself.
And the DEA quietly admitted why, because he wasn't alone. A foreign power in the cartel world had already stepped in to back him, and you won't believe who it was. While Cartel de los Soles weaponized the Venezuelan state, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel perfected global expansion. El Mencho's empire thrives on ruthless pragmatism. Everything that produces money is good enough for them.
Everything that produces money, they're going to be interested in. They're going to scare those people. They're going to take the lands, their houses, everything they own.
CJNG was formed in 2010. Since then, it evolved from a classic Mexican cartel into a global powerhouse, forging ties with Chinese chemical suppliers and Serbian arms traffickers to grow richer, expand faster, and cement itself as one of the most feared criminal syndicates on Earth. That's why the DEA sounded alarms when they traced CJNG shipments back to Venezuelan military-controlled ports, with Tren de Aragua, a known CJNG ally, already embedded in Caracas, and now CJNG enforcers moving product through Sol's protected corridors. Analysts warned of something unprecedented. A narco super cartel. So Maduro brought armed civilians, the military, and the machinery of the state.
Venezuela already has a 230,000 strong army and almost 1 million militiamen and women.
What we have here is the unity of the people and the military against the interventionist actions of US President Trump, who wants to put his Yankee boots in Venezuela.
But these 2-day-long exercises also aim to prepare civilians to fight the so-called internal enemy. National Guardsmen gave lessons on how to tackle demonstrators. The idea is to prepare them should opponents renew their campaign of civil disobedience against the government.
Mencho brought money, weapons, and global logistics. Together, they formed a criminal alliance stronger than either could be alone. And here's the extra nightmare. If US Marines land in Venezuela, they won't be fighting just one enemy. They'll be fighting two cartels fused into a hybrid army of civilians, generals, and sicarios. That means each battlefield could easily become an ambush.
I feel prepared, but we need to prepare even more.
This is for the fatherland.
Here at Venezuela's largest military academy, civilians from all over Caracas are being taught the basics, from manning an anti-aircraft battery, to assembling an Uzi submachine gun, to learning to use a rifle.
And if you thought that was terrifying, wait until you see how stepping foot in Venezuela might flip the script entirely, trapping the Marines themselves inside a killbox. On paper, Trump's deployment looked unstoppable. 3 destroyers bristling with missiles, 4,500 Marines, and a $50 million bounty that made Maduro the most hunted man in the Americas. From Washington's perspective, it was checkmate, a narco dictator cornered on his own shores. But no battle this big is simple. Venezuela's geography and politics rewrote the rules. Vast coastlines exposed to ambush, jungles and mountains, perfect for guerrilla warfare, and cities where militias could vanish into the population. Maduro flipped the narrative and armed millions of civilians. He's sending the same message over and over. Trump is an invader, and Venezuela will not tolerate invaders.
Donald Trump, hands up Venezuela. De inmediati.
The people enlisting in his war now seem to echo his feelings.
Venezuela is responsible for bringing down empires, and this is the last empire that will fall, the United States. Mark my words, it's Venezuela's role to do it. In fact, we've already started. We're in the process. What's left of it is just the illusion of an empire.
In Caracas, militias were embedded in what Maduro called peace quadrants, invisible until they decided to strike. The real nightmare, though? Tren de Aragua, Venezuela's homegrown terror gang, already declared a transnational threat, is integrated seamlessly into this militia structure. This isn't even news anymore, so the Marines could land, yes, and probably will. But the moment boots touch Venezuelan soil, the hunters could become the hunted. Guerrilla ambushes in slums, car bombs in border cities, and worse, Venezuela itself could become the killbox. Now here's what happens when a transnational cartel feels cornered by one of the most powerful governments in the world. History shows one thing: cartels don't back down when threatened. They escalate. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel has already demonstrated scorched earth tactics in Mexico. Analysts recall footage of CJNG drones rigged with explosives.
It's a convoy of vehicles you can see right there, and you can quite literally see a bomb drop from this drone and actually make contact down there.
That was Mencho's signature, turning farmland and city streets alike into war zones. Cartel de los Soles fought differently because they are a different kind of cartel. If Mexican cartels bribe or threaten officials, Los Soles are the officials. As this police chief puts it,
lo que llaman operaciones en negro. Operaciones en negro es que apagas todos los radares para que no sean detectadas las movilizaciones. ¿Quiénes son los que pueden apagar el radio o desactivar los radares? La Fuerza Armada.
So their generals could move shipments through ports as if they were state cargo. When cornered, they leaned on impunity and networks that spanned the government itself. Now imagine those two legacies colliding in one theater of war. Souls with state-level control, CJNG with raw firepower. Together, they could strike way beyond Venezuela. Intelligence briefings warned of retaliatory attacks in Colombia and Panama. Puerto Rico, already bracing from US deployments, was seen as a prime target. Now the US government faces a terrible dilemma. Even a limited operation like this could turn into a prolonged occupation against millions of urban guerrillas. Imagine the headlines. The United States invades a Latin American country. Simply put, a lot of countries will have a problem with it. This is the issue Trump now faces. By cornering cartels, he may have triggered the kind of war the hemisphere hasn't seen since Vietnam, and experts warned the blowback could take years to resolve. Trump wanted to crush cartels once and for all, but instead, he might be on the edge of destabilizing the entire hemisphere, with the cartels ready to strike back harder than ever before. Here's how it could all go down. So first, Trump raged after learning Maduro is working with El Mencho. Then, Maduro raged after Trump deployed his ships. But now, dozens of leaders across Latin America are sounding alarms that their showdown could spark something far worse. Colombia's Gustavo Petro cautioned bluntly,
Los gringos están en la olla si piensan que invadiendo Venezuela resuelven su problema. Meten a Venezuela en el caso de Siria, solo que con el problema que se arrastran a Colombia lo mismo.
It wasn't just Colombia. Cuba, Nicaragua, and Bolivia rallied against what they called aggression from Washington. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel condemned it as an unacceptable threat of aggression. Nicaragua's Daniel Ortega pushed further, demanding to know why all of Latin America has not reacted unanimously and strongly against the tyrants in Washington. Trump's White House insisted the buildup was about one thing: drugs.
Talking about sending military forces to fight against the drug cartels in Latin America. Do you think it's worth sending our forces, our U.S. forces there to take this on?
Cartels where?
Central Latin America.
Well, Latin America's got a lot of cartels. They've got a lot of drugs flowing. So, we want to protect our country. We have to protect our country. We haven't been doing it for 4 years. And we love this country like they love their countries. We have to protect our country. So, we're playing a tough game, but we'll have more to say about that soon.
The argument was that fentanyl deaths justified extraordinary measures. That's what Trump's people kept saying ever since his order designating cartels as terrorists. But one, wars have devastating consequences. And two, critics across the region and even in Washington called that a cover story, pointing out that Venezuela's cocaine exports had long been tolerated until regime change became the goal. Maduro, meanwhile, spun the optics into his greatest advantage. By mobilizing millions of civilians, he turned what began as a personal bounty hunt into a national resistance. He even says he's more diplomatic and civilized than Trump, and that is where the danger peaks. If Trump pushes forward, the US could find itself portrayed as the invader, while Maduro casts himself as the defender of sovereignty. If he pulls back, he looks weak before both allies and enemies. Either way, the alliance of souls and CJNG survives. Expert historians are saying it straight up. This war will help Maduro.
In some way, it can help Maduro. I mean, he can say, look, the threat is real. It's not just propaganda. Here are the Americans. Here are the ships. So let's close ranks behind the government.
So here's the final terrifying question. Will Trump dismantle the cartels at their source? Or will this narco super cartel, armed with militias and foreign allies, turn America's show of force into the bloodiest cartel war in history? And how many innocents will suffer before we have an answer? Please feel free to share your thoughts with us in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth videos like this. Meanwhile, click on any of the cards on your screen right now to watch more of our videos.